history enthusiasts, and welcome back to Vibing History. Tonight, we journey to a place shrouded in the mists of time, a monumental testament to an ancient African civilization often overlooked in the grand tapestry of world history. We're talking about Great Zimbabwe, a city of stone, whose very existence challenges preconceived notions and whispers tales of immense power, intricate trade, and enduring mystery. As we prepare to unravel the secrets embedded in these magnificent ruins, I invite you to settle in, perhaps grab a warm drink, and let the echoes of the past wash over you. If this journey into the heart of a forgotten empire resonates, please consider tapping that like button, sharing this story with a fellow curious soul, and dropping your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement truly helps us keep these ancient stories alive. Now, prepare yourselves for a deep dive into the extraordinary history of Great Zimbabwe. Good evening, or perhaps good morning, depending on where the currents of time have carried you. Settle in, find that comfortable rhythm, because tonight we're journeying back, not to the familiar shores of the Mediterranean or the sands of ancient Egypt, but deep into the heart of southern Africa to unveil a mystery etched in stone. We're going to talk about a place that defies simplistic narratives, a testament to ingenuity, power, and a civilization often overlooked in the grand tapestry of ancient history, Great Zimbabwe. Imagine, if you will, the rolling hills of what is now the modern country of Zimbabwe, a landscape imbued with the echoes of untold centuries. And amidst these hills, rising like a silent, monumental whisper from the earth, are structures unlike anything else in pre-colonial southern Africa. Vast, intricate, and built entirely without mortar, these stone edifices tell a story of a sophisticated society, a powerful kingdom that flourished for centuries. This is Great Zimbabwe, the capital of a kingdom that, at its peak, was home to perhaps as many as 18,000 souls, a bustling metropolis in an age long past, its influence stretching across 50,000 square kilometers. This isn't merely a collection of ruins. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a monument to the ancestors of the Shona people, who, from around 1000 CE, began to transform this landscape. The major construction, the most ambitious phases of building, commenced in the 11th century and continued relentlessly until the 15th. Then, sometime in the 16th or 17th century, silence fell. The city, once vibrant and teeming with life, was abandoned, leaving behind these magnificent, enigmatic remains. Now, the very name, Zimbabwe, carries a profound weight. It's a Shona word, first recorded by a Portuguese captain named Vicente Pegadu in 1531. He noted that the natives of the country call these edifices Simbeo, which according to their language signifies court. There are two primary theories for its etymology, both rooted in the Shona language. One suggests it comes from Zimbabwe, meaning large houses of stone. A fitting description, wouldn't you agree? The other theory proposes a contracted form of Zimbabwe, translating to venerated houses in the Zulu dialect of Shona, often applied to the dwellings or graves of revered chiefs. Either way, the name itself speaks to the grandeur and significance of this place to its original inhabitants. But before the colossal stone walls rose, before the kingdom of Great Zimbabwe even existed, this land was inhabited. For over 100,000 years, the San people made their home here. Then, around 150 BCE, Bantu-speaking communities arrived, establishing agricultural chiefdoms. From the 4th to the 7th centuries CE, communities belonging to the Gokamir or Ziwa cultures farmed these valleys, mining and working iron. Yet, they built no stone structures. These early Iron Age settlements, and the later Gumani people, are considered the ancestors of the Karana, a south-central Shona group, who would eventually lay the foundations for Great Zimbabwe. The true marvel of Great Zimbabwe lies in its architecture, particularly the dry stone walls. meaning built entirely without mortar, each stone meticulously fitted together with astounding precision. Imagine the sheer labor, the engineering skill, the profound understanding of geology and balance required to construct walls 11 meters high, extending for hundreds of meters. These weren't haphazard piles of rock. They were monumental statements of power, artistry, and communal effort. The site itself is a sprawling complex, encompassing three distinct architectural groups: the Hill Complex, the Valley Complex, and the most iconic of all, the Great Enclosure. These weren't all built at once, but rather grew and evolved over centuries. The Hill Complex, perched atop a natural granite outcrop, is the oldest, dating from the 11th to the 13th centuries. It's a fascinating place, with enclosures that some scholars believe house the Zimbabwe birds, those enigmatic soapstone carvings that have become a national symbol. It also features a massive boulder shaped eerily like one of these very birds, overseeing the landscape. Then there's the Great Enclosure, the magnificent centerpiece, constructed predominantly during the 13th and 14th centuries. Its outer wall, with a staggering height of 11 meters, forms a powerful, curving embrace, within which lies an inner wall and a series of structures. And there, standing proudly between these walls, is the conical tower, a perfectly circular 9-meter-tall structure, its purpose still debated by scholars. Was it a granary, a symbol of royal power, or something else entirely? Many believe the Great Enclosure served as the royal residence, a seat of power where rituals and public functions were held, clearly demarcated by these impressive stone boundaries. The Valley Complex, occupying the space between the Hill Complex and the Great Enclosure, is further divided into Upper and Lower Valley ruins, reflecting different periods of occupation. While scholars still debate the precise functions of these complexes, whether they were successive royal residences or served distinct purposes like ritual sites, citizen housing, and royal dwellings, what is undeniable is the deliberate design, the monumental scale, and the profound significance of each stone laid. Most of the population, it's important to remember, didn't live within these grand stone structures. They resided in houses made of mud on wooden frames, humble dwellings that have long since returned to the earth. The stone structures, we can infer, were reserved for the elite, the ruling class, the sacred spaces of the kingdom. This was a society with a clear hierarchy, where the political-religious ideology served to legitimize the king, or Mambo, forging a powerful link between leaders, their ancestors, and the divine. Some even suggest that the shrine in the Hill Complex was the home of Svikuro, spirit mediums who acted as the conscience of the state, preserving the traditions of the founders. Now, imagine the wealth, the resources, and the organizational power required to build and sustain such a city for centuries. Great Zimbabwe wasn't just a monumental construction. It was a thriving economic engine. It emerged as a center for trade, gradually replacing the earlier kingdom of Mapungubwe around 1300. Its regional networks were expansive, trading in salt, cattle, grain, and copper, reaching as far north as the Kundalunga Plateau in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. But the true source of Great Zimbabwe's immense wealth, the very lifeblood that fueled its growth, was its strategic control over the trade routes from the gold fields of the Zimbabwean Plateau to the Swahili coast. Through bustling Swahili city-states like Sofala, the kingdom exported vast quantities of gold and ivory into the lucrative Indian Ocean trade network. And when we talk about international commerce, the evidence is tangible. Chinese pottery shards, coins from Arabia, vibrant glass beads, and other non-local items have been unearthed at the site. These aren't just trinkets. They're silent witnesses to a sophisticated global connectivity, proving that Great Zimbabwe was far from isolated. It was a vital node in an ancient, interwoven world economy. Beyond the grandeur of the structures themselves and the whispers of trade, the artifacts recovered from Great Zimbabwe offer a deeper glimpse into its cultural and spiritual heart. The most iconic of these are the 8 Zimbabwe birds, carved with exquisite detail from micaceous schist, a type of soapstone. These figures once stood atop towering monoliths. though their exact original placement is debated. Slots in a platform within the eastern enclosure of the hill complex suggest where they might have proudly stood. These birds, often believed to represent the battler eagle, were not mere decorations. In Shona culture, the battler eagle is seen as a good omen, a protective spirit, and a messenger of the gods. Imagine the reverence, the spiritual significance these figures held for the people of Great Zimbabwe. Other artifacts tell their own stories. Intricate soapstone figurines, beautiful pottery, resonant iron gongs, elaborately worked ivory, iron and copper wire, practical iron hose, bronze spearheads, copper ingots, crucibles, and delicate gold beads, bracelets, pendants, and sheaths. Each piece, whether utilitarian or ceremonial, speaks to the skill and artistry of the great Zimbabwe craftsman. Yet, for all its glory, for all its profound historical significance, Great Zimbabwe has also been at the center of a historical storm, a maelstrom of prejudice, denial, and the insidious rewriting of history. The Zimbabwe controversy, as it came to be known, is a painful yet crucial part of its story. When the first Europeans rediscovered these ruins in the late 19th century, their preconceived notions about African capabilities were deeply entrenched. Adam Render, a German-American hunter, showed the ruins to Karl Mach, a German explorer, in 1871. Mach, unable to reconcile such sophistication with his racist worldview, immediately speculated about a biblical association, suggesting King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba as the builders. He even claimed a wooden lintel he found must be Lebanese cedar brought by Phoenicians. This Sheba legend became a pervasive, deeply ingrained narrative within the white settler community of Rhodesia, so much so that later scholars like James Theodore Bent expressed utter disdain for ever hearing those names again in connection to the ruins. This denial of African ingenuity wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, politically motivated. The colonial government of Rhodesia, driven by its civilizing mission rationale, actively pressured archaeologists to deny that indigenous Africans could have built such structures. The idea that black Africans had created a powerful, sophisticated civilization would have completely dismantled their narrative of racial superiority and their right to rule. So, fantastical theories attributing construction to Jews, Arabs, Phoenicians, anyone but the Shona, proliferated. Archaeologists who dared to challenge this official narrative faced severe consequences. Paul Sinclair, an archaeologist stationed at Great Zimbabwe in the 1970s, recounts being explicitly warned by the director of museums and monuments to be extremely careful about talking to the press about the origins of the Great Zimbabwe state. He was told it was okay to say the yellow people had built it, but I wasn't allowed to mention radiocarbon dates. This suppression, this blatant censorship of scientific fact, culminated in the departure of prominent archaeologists like Peter Garlake and Roger Summers from the country. It was, as Sinclair starkly put it, the first time since Germany in the 30s that archaeology has been so directly censored. It took until the 1950s for the African origin of Great Zimbabwe to finally gain consensus among archaeologists, a testament to the persistent work of dedicated scholars like David Randall McIver, who in the early 20th century, using proper scientific methods, definitively concluded that the structures were built by the ancestors of the Shona people and were of medieval date. And later, Gertrude Codone Thompson, in 1929, after meticulous excavation, also unequivocally stated, examination of all the existing evidence, gathered from every quarter, still can produce not one single item that is not in accordance with the claim of Bantu origin and medieval date. Since the 1950s, archaeological consensus has firmly established the African origins of Great Zimbabwe. Radiocarbon dating, alongside artifacts from China, Persia, and Syria, all point to continuous settlement and flourishing between the 12th and 15th centuries. Today, it is widely accepted that the builders were indeed the Shona people, likely descended from the Gokamir culture, with some evidence suggesting early influence from the Venda-speaking peoples of the Mapungubwe civilization. The damage inflicted upon the ruins, however, wasn't limited to historical revisionism. European antiquarians, driven by greed and a desire for treasures, looted and pillaged Great Zimbabwe from the 1890s to the 1920s. Gold and artifacts were ripped from their contexts, destroying invaluable archaeological stratigraphy and making future scientific study incredibly difficult. Even later reconstruction attempts in the post-independence era, though well-intentioned, sometimes caused further harm, ironically alienating local communities from their sacred site. And, inevitably, the simple passage of time, the elements, and unchecked tourism have taken their toll. Yet despite these scars, Great Zimbabwe endures. It stands as a powerful symbol. After the creation of the modern state of Zimbabwe in 1980, the country itself was named after this ancient site. Its iconic soapstone bird carvings were retained as a national symbol, proudly depicted on the new Zimbabwean flag. It became, and remains, a potent emblem of African achievement, a silent but defiant voice against centuries of colonial narratives. Great Zimbabwe is more than just ancient stones. It is a profound historical narrative, a testament to the sophistication and ingenuity of African civilizations. It's a reminder that history isn't always found in the grand empires of the Mediterranean, but also in the dry stone walls of a magnificent, forgotten kingdom in the heart of Africa. It's a place that compels us to listen to the whispers of the past, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to finally, truly, appreciate the full, rich, and diverse tapestry of human history. As we conclude this segment, perhaps you can visualize those 11-meter-high walls, those intricate enclosures built stone by stone, without mortar, by a people whose story was almost lost to prejudice. Let that image settle in. Let the weight of that history resonate. Because next, we will delve deeper into how Great Zimbabwe forged an ancient African economic powerhouse, tracing the trade winds and whispers of gold that built this extraordinary empire. Welcome back, my friends. Last time, we began our journey into the heart of an ancient African empire, touching upon the sheer monumental scale and the enduring mystery of Great Zimbabwe. We explored the very stones that whispered tales of a forgotten age, the awe-inspiring dry stone masonry that defied easy explanation, and the complex societal structures that allowed such a civilization to flourish. We walked amongst the hill complex, the valley complex, and the great enclosure, imagining the lives that unfolded within those silent, towering walls. Now, as the sun climbs higher over the vast African plains, we turn our gaze to the pulsating lifeblood of this incredible civilization. We will delve into the intricate web of commerce and influence that transformed Great Zimbabwe from a mere settlement into a veritable economic powerhouse, a hub of wealth and a beacon of ingenuity that shaped the destiny of southern Africa. This is the story of how trade winds carried the whispers of gold, of ivory, and of cultural exchange, echoing through the ages and leaving an indelible mark on history. Imagine, if you will, the bustling scene around 1300 CE. Great Zimbabwe had, by this point, firmly established itself as the successor to Mapungubwe, a powerful kingdom further south. The shift wasn't sudden, but rather a gradual ascendancy, like the slow, steady rise of a river after a heavy rain. Great Zimbabwe, with its strategic location and growing influence, began to dominate the vast regional networks that stretched across the continent. Picture caravans, laden with goods, making their way across dusty tracks, guided by experienced traders who knew every turn, every watering hole, and every potential danger. These regional networks were truly expansive, reaching far beyond the immediate vicinity of Great Zimbabwe. From the salt pans and cattle herds of the Zimbabwean plateau, goods flowed outwards and vital commodities flowed inwards. Salt, a precious commodity in any ancient society, was exchanged for grains from fertile lands, for intricately worked copper, and for the abundant cattle that grazed across the plains. Imagine the vibrant markets, filled with the murmur of bartering, the clinking of copper bangles, and the rich, earthy scent of livestock. These were not merely transactions. They were the very sinews of a burgeoning economy, connecting communities and forging a shared prosperity. But the true engine of Great Zimbabwe's immense wealth lay in its masterful control of the gold fields that peppered the Zimbabwean plateau. This was the precious metal that set Great Zimbabwe apart, elevating its status from a regional power to a significant player on the global stage. Imagine the tireless miners, toiling deep within the earth, extracting the shimmering ore that would eventually adorn kings and queens in distant lands. This gold, along with the magnificent ivory harvested from the region's abundant elephant herds, became the currency of international trade, flowing like a golden river towards the Swahili coast. The Swahili city-states, those vibrant maritime hubs like Sofala, Kilwa, and Zanzibar, acted as crucial intermediaries in this grand design. Imagine the dhows, those iconic sailing vessels with their lateen sails, riding the waves of the Indian Ocean, their holds brimming with the treasures of Africa. Through these coastal cities, Great Zimbabwe's gold and ivory made their way into the vast and complex Indian Ocean trade network. This was a network that stretched across continents, connecting Africa to the Arabian Peninsula, Persia, India, and even distant China. Pause for a moment and consider the sheer scale of this ancient globalization. At a time when much of Europe was still emerging from the relative isolation of the early medieval period, Great Zimbabwe was at the heart of a sophisticated international trade system. Imagine the vibrant exchanges in those Swahili ports, where traders from diverse cultures mingled, their languages a cacophony of commerce, their eyes alight with the prospect of new riches. The archaeological evidence from Great Zimbabwe itself paints a vivid picture of this far-reaching commerce. Excavations have unearthed a dazzling array of foreign artifacts, delicate Chinese pottery shards, still retaining the subtle hues of their distant origins, ancient coins from Arabia, perhaps used by merchants in their dealings, and countless glass beads, imported from distant lands, each one a testament to the intricate networks of exchange. These aren't just pretty trinkets. They're tangible threads connecting Great Zimbabwe to a wider world, proving beyond doubt its vital role in global trade. But it wasn't all about gold and ivory. While international commerce brought immense wealth, the local agricultural trade remained the bedrock of the economy. Cattle, in particular, held a place of paramount importance. Imagine the vast herds, a testament to the agricultural prowess of the Great Zimbabwe people. These herds, carefully managed by the royal court, moved seasonally, following the rhythms of the land, providing sustenance and wealth to the entire state. The ability to sustain such a large population, upwards of 10,000, perhaps even 18,000 at its peak, speaks volumes about the sophisticated agricultural practices and resource management of the time. The institutionalization of Great Zimbabwe's politico-religious ideology played a crucial role in legitimizing the position of the king, or Mambo. There was a deeply ingrained link between the leaders, their revered ancestors, and the divine. This spiritual connection provided a powerful framework for governance and social cohesion, fostering a sense of shared identity and purpose. Ken Mafuka, a respected scholar, suggests that the shrine within the hill complex was the sacred domain of spirit mediums, known as Fakiro. These Fakiro were not merely spiritual guides. They served as the conscience of the state, preserving the ancient traditions of the founders and ensuring the continuity of the kingdom's values. Imagine the solemn rituals, the invocations of ancient spirits, the profound sense of connection to a heritage stretching back through generations. These were not just political figures. They were conduits to the divine, providing guidance and stability to a thriving empire. The city itself, though renowned for its monumental stone structures, was also home to a much larger population living in more ephemeral dwellings. The majority of the inhabitants resided in houses constructed from mud on wooden frames, a common architectural style for the time. While these structures have largely vanished with the passage of centuries, Their presence is implied by the sheer scale of the stone enclosures, which were likely reserved for the royal family, the elite, and official buildings. Imagine the bustling streets and pathways that would have wound their way through these more humble dwellings, the sounds of daily life echoing through the valley. The great enclosure, with its breathtaking 11-meter-high dry stone walls, stands as a testament to the ingenuity and organizational capabilities of the people of Great Zimbabwe. Constructed between the 13th and 14th centuries, it likely served as the royal residence, a seat of power and a symbol of the Mambo's authority. Within its imposing perimeter, public spaces were demarcated for rituals and ceremonies, further emphasizing the close intertwining of political and spiritual life. Imagine the grand processions, the gatherings of the populace, all beneath the watchful gaze of those monumental walls. One of the most enigmatic features of Great Zimbabwe, and indeed a significant artifact, is the series of 8 Zimbabwe birds. Carved from micaceous schist, a type of soapstone, these magnificent birds once adorned the tops of monoliths, each as tall as a person. While their exact placement remains a subject of scholarly debate, slots in a platform within the eastern enclosure of the hill complex appear to have been designed to hold them. Imagine these powerful symbols, perhaps representing the battler eagle, a revered bird in Shona culture, believed to be a good omen, a protective spirit, and a messenger of the gods. Their presence would have imbued the hill complex with an even greater spiritual significance, connecting the earthly realm with the divine. Other artifacts recovered from the site further illuminate the rich cultural tapestry of Great Zimbabwe. More soapstone figurines, intricate pottery, resonant iron gongs, elaborately worked ivory, and a variety of metal tools and adornments. The discovery of gold beads, bracelets, pendants, and sheaths speaks to the abundance of this precious metal and its utilization for both wealth and adornment. The presence of copper ingots and crucibles points to a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, allowing them to transform raw or into valuable objects. This, my friends, was Great Zimbabwe, a civilization built not just on stone, but on the relentless pursuit of prosperity, the mastery of trade, and a profound spiritual connection to their land and ancestors. It was a hub of exchange, a testament to human ingenuity, and a powerful force in the ancient world. But even the mightiest empires, the most prosperous civilizations, eventually faced challenges. As the 15th century dawned, whispers of change began to drift across the land, carried on the very trade winds that had once brought so much wealth. The vast Indian Ocean trade, which had been the lifeblood of Great Zimbabwe, began to experience a global economic downturn. Demand for gold, the cornerstone of their prosperity, started to wane. This was a critical turning point, a shifting tide that would inevitably reshape the destiny of this magnificent empire. In the next segment, we will explore the enigmatic decline of Great Zimbabwe, delving into the factors that contributed to its eventual abandonment and the theories that attempt to unravel the mystery of its great silence. So, let the gentle hum of history lull you. Let your imagination roam free. And join me again as we continue to unveil the stories embedded in the stones of Great Zimbabwe. And so, we arrive at the Great Silence. The point in the story of Great Zimbabwe where the magnificent stone walls seem to hold their breath, no longer echoing with the clamor of a thriving metropolis, but instead with the quiet rustle of the wind. We've journeyed through its origins, marveled at its architectural grandeur, and understood its pivotal role as an economic powerhouse. Now, we must confront the most enigmatic chapter of all, the slow, unfolding mystery of its decline and eventual abandonment. What forces, unseen and perhaps unrecorded, led to the emptying of this once vibrant heart of an empire? Imagine, if you will, the bustling scene we described in our previous segment. The throngs of people, the rhythmic sounds of trade, the constant hum of life echoing across the valley complex and within the great enclosure. Then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, that hum begins to fade. The pathways become less worn, the markets less crowded, the fires in the mud-in thatched dwellings fewer and further between. It's not a sudden catastrophe, not a dramatic fall, but rather a gradual ebb, a turning of the tide that ultimately leaves behind a monumental shell. The precise causes of Great Zimbabwe's demise remain a subject of intense scholarly debate, a puzzle with many pieces, some missing, others stubbornly refusing to fit. Unlike the dramatic sacking of a city or the eruption of a volcano, there's no single, clear event that marks its end. Instead, archaeologists and historians propose a confluence of factors, a slow entanglement of environmental, economic, and political pressures that chipped away at the empire's foundations until it could no longer sustain its monumental capital. One of the most immediate and frequently cited culprits points to environmental degradation. A large, thriving population like Great Zimbabwe's, estimated at its peak to be anywhere from 10,000 to 18,000 people, places immense strain on its surrounding environment. Think about it. Thousands of mouths to feed, countless homes requiring wood for fuel and construction, vast herds of cattle grazing the grasslands. Over centuries, such sustained pressure could lead to deforestation, soil exhaustion, and a depletion of vital resources. The Shona oral traditions, passed down through generations, speak of a salt shortage, which, while literal, could also be a figurative way of expressing a more general depletion of agricultural land and critical resources essential for the community's survival. If the very earth that sustained them could no longer provide, then migration would become not just an option, but a necessity. Coupled with the land's exhaustion, water scarcity might have played a crucial role. While Great Zimbabwe was situated in a region generally favorable for rainfall, even such areas can experience periods of drought or a gradual reduction in water availability. The extensive Dhaka pits, which we discussed earlier, were ingenious water management systems, capable of holding vast quantities of water. But even these sophisticated reservoirs would be insufficient if the aquifers themselves began to dry up, or if the growing population unintentionally contaminated their primary water sources. Imagine the slow, creeping panic as the wells yield less and less, as the crops wither in the fields and the cattle grow thin. Such existential threats would undeniably compel a mass exodus. Beyond the environmental pressures, the economic heart of Great Zimbabwe, its very lifeblood, began to falter. The empire's dominance over the region was intricately linked to its control of trade routes, particularly those flowing from the gold fields of the Zimbabwean plateau to the bustling Swahili coast. This international commerce, especially in gold and ivory, fueled the wealth and influence of the ruling elite. However, the early 15th century saw a significant global economic downturn. As demand for gold decreased on the international stage, the very engine of Great Zimbabwe's prosperity began to sputter. The once lucrative trade routes became less profitable, and the flow of exotic goods that reinforced the elite's power diminished. In response to this changing economic landscape, it's plausible that the elites sought to expand regional trading networks, hoping to find new avenues of prosperity. While this might have brought short-term gains for other settlements, it ultimately led to a decentralization of power. New trading hubs emerged, thriving on these expanded networks, inadvertently siphoning off the economic vitality that had once been concentrated at Great Zimbabwe. By the late 15th century, the consequences of this strategic shift would have begun to manifest, not just economically, but politically. Oral traditions speak of Nyatsimba Mutoda, a member of Great Zimbabwe's royal family, leading a significant portion of the population north in search of new salt deposits and fertile lands. This move, driven by resource scarcity and the allure of new opportunities, ultimately led to the founding of the powerful Matapa Empire. Such migrations, often initiated by ambitious members of the royal family, suggest internal divisions and perhaps even succession disputes within Great Zimbabwe itself. When a ruling dynasty fractures, and powerful factions leave to establish their own centers of power, the prestige and authority of the original capital inevitably diminish. Furthermore, the emergence of new trade routes along the Zambezi River, particularly those facilitated by Angoche traders, bypassed Great Zimbabwe entirely. These routes connected the goldfields directly to the rising Matapa and Ngombe Elide, redirecting the flow of wealth away from the ancient capital. This economic realignment played a significant role in the rise of other regional powers, such as Kami, which eventually became the capital of the Kingdom of Bichua. By the 16th century, the political and economic Zhongshin had definitively shifted away from Great Zimbabwe, moving north and west, leaving the Great Stone City in its wake. So, it wasn't a single hammer blow that shattered Great Zimbabwe, but rather a slow, relentless erosion from multiple directions. Environmental pressures like resource depletion and potential water shortages weakened its foundations. A global economic downturn reduced the demand for its most valuable exports. Internal political shifts, perhaps driven by succession conflicts, led to outward migrations and the formation of rival empires. And the rerouting of crucial trade networks further isolated Great Zimbabwe from the flow of wealth and influence. The site, however, wasn't immediately abandoned overnight. Evidence suggests that it continued to be inhabited, albeit by a dwindling population, well into the 17th century. The Grand Walls, once a symbol of power and prosperity, would have stood as silent witnesses to the slow departure of their builders. The once vibrant courts, the bustling markets, the sacred rituals in the hill complex, all gradually faded into memory, leaving behind only the enduring stone structures to tell a story of a kingdom that rose, flourished, and then, for reasons both clear and obscure, entered the great silence. But even in its abandonment, Great Zimbabwe retained a profound spiritual significance for the local communities. The memory of its builders, the Shona ancestors, continued to imbue the ruins with a sacred aura. This profound respect, however, would soon be challenged by a new wave of visitors, whose interpretations of the ancient stones would spark a different kind of conflict, a battle for truth and the rightful ownership of history itself. This, as we shall see, brings us to the next, and perhaps most controversial, chapter in the story of Great Zimbabwe. From the very first whispers of its existence carried by Portuguese traders in the 16th century, Great Zimbabwe has been a battleground of truth, a magnificent, enigmatic city, a testament to sophisticated African ingenuity. Yet for centuries, its very origins were systematically denied, twisted, and appropriated. This is the story of the Zimbabwe controversy, a deeply troubling chapter where science and history collided with the insidious forces of racial prejudice and colonial ambition. Imagine, if you will, the early 16th century. Vicente Peguedu, a captain of the Portuguese garrison of Sofala on the coast of modern-day Mozambique, hears tales of a remarkable inland city. He records it in 1531 as Simbeo, noting that the natives of the country call these edifices by that name, which in their language signifies court. This is a critical piece of information, a direct link from indigenous people to their creation. But this crucial detail, like so many others, would be buried under a mountain of European speculation and denial. Fast forward to the late 19th century. European explorers, adventurers, and prospectors pushed deeper into southern Africa. In 1867, a German-American hunter named Adam Rinder stumbles upon the ruins. For years later, he leads the German explorer and geographer Karl Mach to the site. Mach, captivated but seemingly unable to reconcile such grandeur with indigenous African capabilities, immediately casts about for a more acceptable origin story. And what does he find? The intoxicating, albeit completely unfounded, legend of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This narrative, which had already been suggested by earlier writers, seized Mach's imagination. He He went so far as to claim that a wooden lintel at the site must be Lebanese cedar, thus proving Phoenician involvement. The idea that this sophisticated stone city could have been built by Africans was, to many European minds of the era, simply inconceivable. This was the dawn of what became known as the Zimbabwe controversy. The Queen of Sheba legend, enthusiastically promoted by Mach, became pervasive within the white settler community. It offered a convenient narrative, a glorious, ancient civilization, but one built by outsiders by others. This allowed colonial powers to admire the ruins without acknowledging the intellectual and architectural prowess of the very people whose land they were colonizing. The famous archaeologist James Theodore Bent, who later excavated at the site, would lament how the names of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba had become so distasteful to us that we never expect to hear them again without an involuntary shudder. He recognized the myth for what it was, a barrier to genuine historical understanding. Bent, while sponsored by Cecil Rhodes and funded by the Royal Geographical Society, was not immune to the prejudices of his time. In his influential book, The Ruined Cities of Mashonaland, published in 1892, he initially attributed the ruins to either the Phoenicians or the Arabs. By the third edition of his book in 1902, he was more specific, favoring a Semitic race of Arabian origin as the builders, depicting them as strongly commercial traders who operated within a client African city. Even as he provided detailed descriptions of the ruins, the deep-seated inability to attribute them to indigenous Africans persisted. The damage during this period was not just intellectual, but physical. European antiquarians, driven by a thirst for treasure and a desire to prove their theories, extensively looted and pillaged Great Zimbabwe and surrounding sites between the 1890s and the 1920s. This amateurish digging, particularly by figures like Richard Nicklenhall, caused widespread damage, destroying invaluable stratigraphy and greatly inhibiting the work of future, more scientific archaeologists. Gold and artifacts were ripped from their contexts, forever severing them from the stories they could tell. Some sections of the ruins were even mined for gold, an act of sheer colonial greed that prioritized profit over preservation. The colonial government of Rhodesia, founded on the principle of white minority rule, actively pressured archaeologists to deny the African origins of Great Zimbabwe. To acknowledge that Black Africans had built such a magnificent civilization would have fundamentally undermined their civilizing mission. The rationale they used to justify their control and exploitation of the land and its people. It would have dismantled the very foundation of their supremacist ideology. Archaeologists who dared to challenge the official narrative faced severe consequences. Paul Sinclair, an archaeologist stationed at Great Zimbabwe, recounted how he was explicitly told by the director of the Museums and Monuments Organization to be extremely careful about talking to the press about the origins of the Great Zimbabwe state. He was warned that the government was pressuring them to withhold the correct information. Censorship was rampant. Guidebooks, museum displays, school textbooks, radio programs, newspapers, and films were all scrutinized. Sinclair even recalled a member of the museum board of trustees threatening him with dismissal if he publicly stated that Black people had built Zimbabwe. He said it was okay to say the yellow people had built it. Sinclair remembered, but I wasn't allowed to mention radiocarbon dates. It was the first time since Germany in the 30s that archaeology has been so directly censored. This suppression of academic freedom culminated in the forced departure of prominent archaeologists like Peter Garlake, the senior inspector of monuments for Rhodesia, and Roger Summers of the National Museum. Their work, which increasingly pointed toward an African origin, was deemed a threat to the colonial establishment. Yet, even amidst this intellectual battleground, the truth began to emerge. The first truly scientific archaeological excavations at the site were undertaken by David Randall Maciver for the British Association in 1905 to 1906. In his work, Medieval Rhodesia, he directly rejected the fantastical claims of Mach and others. Based on the presence of Bantu origin objects, Randall Maciver concluded that all available evidence pointed to the ancestors of the Shona people as the builders of Great Zimbabwe. Crucially, he proposed a wholly medieval date for the walled fortifications and temple, a radical departure from the ancient biblical theories. While his initial findings were met with skepticism, partly due to the limited scope of his early excavations, they laid a vital foundation. Then came Gertrude Cotton Thompson. In 1929, after an intensive, albeit brief, 12-day visit and the digging of several strategically placed trenches, she delivered a decisive blow to the European origin theories. Her team unearthed domestic ironwork, glass beads, and a gold bracelet. At a meeting of the British Association in Johannesburg, she unequivocally announced her Bantu origin theory. Examination of all the existing evidence, gathered from every quarter, she declared, still could produce not one single item that is not in accordance with the claim of Bantu origin and medieval date. Cotton Thompson's modern methods, despite initial resistance, brought strong scientific credibility to the African origin theory. By 1931, she had further refined her understanding, confirming the medieval origin for the masonry work, primarily from the 14th and 15th centuries. It took until the 1950s for a broad consensus to finally emerge among archaeologists. Great Zimbabwe was, without a shadow of a doubt, a creation of indigenous Africans. Artifacts, radiocarbon dating, and extensive research confirmed continuous settlement between the 12th and 15th centuries. Dated finds, including Chinese, Persian, and Syrian artifacts, further solidified this chronology. A reanalysis in the 1970s of a beam that had previously yielded anomalous dates, now using more accurate techniques, confirmed a 14th century origin. Archaeologists now generally agree that the builders spoke one of the Shona languages, drawing on pottery evidence, oral traditions, anthropology, and DNA. Recent scholarship strongly supports the construction of Great Zimbabwe by Shona and Venda peoples, likely descended from the earlier Gokamir culture, which flourished in the region from around 500 AD. The reclamation of Great Zimbabwe's true history became a powerful symbol for Black nationalist groups. For those fighting for majority rule, reasserting the African origins of this magnificent city was a major aim, a tangible proof of pre-colonial African achievement and sophistication. In 1980, when the new, internationally recognized independent country was formed, it was fittingly renamed Zimbabwe after this very site. The iconic soapstone bird carvings, once appropriated by the Rhodesian flag, were proudly returned to their rightful place as national symbols, depicted on the new Zimbabwean flag. After independence, Great Zimbabwe continued to serve as a powerful emblem, reflecting and legitimizing the shifting policies of the ruling regime. From interpretations of African socialism to highlighting the accumulation of wealth and power within a ruling elite, the narratives around the site continued to evolve, but always rooted in its African identity. Today, while some of the original bird carvings ended up in the hands of Cecil Rhodes and his associates, most have been returned to Zimbabwe. One, however, remains at Rhodes' former home, Groote Schuur, in Cape Town, a lingering reminder of the historical complexities and the ongoing work of cultural restitution. But the battle for truth is not just fought by academics and politicians. Local communities, the descendants of Great Zimbabwe's builders, have their own narratives, often critical of both the early European antiquarians and even some professional archaeologists for their perceived desecration and appropriation of a sacred site. They lament the silence and closure of Great Zimbabwe, calling for greater recognition of the ownership and control of the site by the ancestors of Maori, their supreme being. This highlights the crucial need for inclusive approaches to historical interpretation, honoring not just scientific findings, but also the living cultural heritage of the people connected to these ancient places. In the early 21st century, the Zimbabwean government underscored the site's enduring significance by endorsing the creation of Great Zimbabwe University, an arts and culture-based institution situated near the ruins. It draws directly from the rich history of the monuments, a symbol of education and a reclamation of cultural narrative. The story of Great Zimbabwe is more than just a tale of ancient stones. It is a powerful illustration of how history can be manipulated and distorted by prejudice, and how tirelessly truth must be fought for. It is a testament to the enduring genius of African civilization, a beacon of identity, and a profound reminder that even the deepest silences in history will eventually yield to the persistent whispers of the past. The echoes of those dry-stacked stones, standing strong against the ravages of time and the tides of denial, continue to speak a language of resilience, innovation, and an undeniable African legacy. And so, our epic journey through the echoing stones of Great Zimbabwe comes to a close. We've walked among the colossal dry stone walls, imagined the bustling markets, and confronted the unsettling truths of its disputed past and mysterious decline. The legacy of Great Zimbabwe stands not just as a monument of architectural genius, but as a powerful symbol of an advanced African civilization, a beacon of resilience reclaimed from the shadows of history. If this deep immersion into the heart of ancient Africa captivated your mind, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who appreciates the untold stories, and subscribe to Vibing History for more expeditions into our world's past. Tell me, what aspect of Great Zimbabwe's story resonated with you the most? And what forgotten kingdom or enigmatic event should we explore next? Until then, keep vibing with history, and may your own journeys always be filled with discovery.